This is Delhi. Please stand by for our next program. This is All India Radio. In our national program of talks tonight, we bring you an interview entitled In Quest of Himself, in which media professional, Edtech pioneer and author Karan Bajaj is in conversation with Naveen K. Gupta of All India Radio, Delhi.
It's not every day that you meet a marketing whiz kid who has done his army school, belonged to an army family, then did his BITS Mesra and went to IIM Bangalore, did marketing there, went to US, wrote books, still writes, and wants to be a yogi. Karan Bajaj, welcome to the National Program of Talks English.
My pleasure, Naveen. Thank you for having me.
Karan, you were born in Shimla.
Yeah.
Did you spend a portion of your childhood in Shimla?
A lot of my childhood in Shimla. My father was in the army, so we moved around a lot, but Shimla was pretty much the base we kept coming to. So I would say I changed about 9 schools, but 4 or 5 years that I spent consistently in one school was in Shimla.
9 schools?
Yeah, in the 12 years of...
So how was making friends in these 9 schools?
I would say there is a phenomenon called third culture kids, TCKs, who don't belong to either the first culture, which is their home, like Shimla, for example, or to the second culture, which is where they're going. So they kind of are like in the no man's land. That's why they're called third culture kids, which are very common traits where they're actually quite good at making friends, but very bad at sustaining friendships because they believe that everything is transient.
But growing up in Shimla, in your formative years, being a TCS case, wouldn't you say that it was kind of hard on you?
I wouldn't say that. I think it was different. I wouldn't say it was hard because I think the advantage for that was that I just spent the rest of my life in replicating somewhat of the same pattern where I was very comfortable taking these significant growth leaps and didn't have that feeling. I wasn't very uncomfortable with change, if you may.
What was BE mechanical engineering like?
As predictable as you can imagine. I think we were at a time in India, which is obviously changing now wonderfully. We were at a time in India where you just defaulted into it. So we didn't really actively choose.
You were head of the editing club.
In college, I was doing a lot of things. Yes, I was the head of theatre in undergrad and I think the editing club in IIM Bangalore.
IIM Bangalore?
IIM Bangalore was doing editing and the club and I was the placement secretary and stuff like that. Yeah.
So how come from mechanical engineering to marketing, what was this leap?
I didn't know marketing in particular. Like I at that point was, or even now, is just a postgraduate diploma in management.
Well, you must have known marketing because you were selling a leading laundry detergent as well as herbal essences for this huge multinational company, which is a global giant.
Yeah.
And you were nominated among the, 100 best in the world?
40 under 40 at that phase.
You're very modest, Karan Bajaj.
I don't think so. Yes, we have just started our conversation.
You started or you stumbled onto writing to escape parents hounding you to get married. Was it?
In 2008, I was 29 years old. I was doing quite well at my, as you rightly said, the laundry soap career. I was doing very good at the consumer packaged goods career. And I suddenly had this feeling that the rest of my life is going to be a version of this current life that I'm leading. So at like 50, 60, I'll probably be doing the same thing if I didn't really shake up my life. So I, at that point of time, decided to leave my job and backpack for a year. And I decided to go to places that I'd always dreamt about, like Brazil and Peru, and cross the Amazon by boat and go to live in Mongolia in Central Asia. So I was like, if I don't do this now, I won't ever do it.
Brother, this is all very 18th century.
Yeah.
You just packed up and left like that?
I packed up and left. Exactly like that. I packed up and left. And in the middle of that journey, I started writing the first novel, which was Keep Off the Crowd. So I kind of accidentally stumbled upon writing. And I don't think my parents were against writing as much as they were against
you backpacking
for a year without any,
Didn't your parents tell you that you leave your job like this, you come back, you won't be having that job?
Yeah, and they warned me that, and they used the very good line from my mother was that just because you live in the US, you can't be an American, you're an Indian. So this is what Americans do, not Indians, so they don't just take off a year and so don't be an American and, so that was her view. And so they did warn me. And then the surprising thing is that I actually came and lived my worst case scenario, which is...
the meltdown happened.
The meltdown happened. So this was September 2008 is when I came back after 9 months out. And that's the time Lehman Brothers had collapsed. Same day that I arrived in the US, Lehman Brothers had collapsed and there were no jobs. So I really lived my worst case scenario after the first sabbatical. And in a curious way, That time it was very hard because I was sleeping on my sister's couch. I was about to hit 30. I was 29 years old. And
Sister is in
the
US.
sister was in the US, and she had she was living in an apartment, and there was a couch in the living room. So I slept there because I'd obviously spent all my money in the travel with the confidence that I would find a job because I'd left at the peak of the US boom where jobs were aplenty, and suddenly I'd come to the crash. And I felt really very big failure because at that time in India, 29 years old, everybody was sharing their picture of their kids and, and their promotions in their jobs. And I felt like I was quite a good student at IIM, and suddenly I was sleeping on my sister's couch, no wife, no job, no kids, nothing to really prove for the 29 years I'd lived on earth. So I was really devastated, to be very honest. There was no big, feeling of victory after coming back from backpacking. I thought I'd made a mistake. And then but I found a job in 3-4 months. And after that, it, in a curious way, it was very liberating because I lived my worst case scenario. And I realized that the worst case scenario is bad, but it's not that bad. You can find a job after a few months of hustling.
So it made you optimistic, or it made you take to people much more in a kinder way?
So I think it made me a little bit more humble. Then also the 6-8 months of backpacking in Brazil, Peru, etc. had changed me significantly because I'd started to truly feel that the world was one, that all differences of color, race, etc. Really, I mean, everybody knows that, but it became a very experiential reality.
Vasudev Kutumbakam.
Vasudev Kutumbakam, and you feel it within you. And I think that made me a better leader when I came back. After that setback, I started to accelerate in my career. So I started to form that thesis, which became an enduring thesis in my life, that when you make decisions of growth, they'll hurt you a lot in the short term, but they'll always pay back in the long term. And that was really a shaping worldview after that, which actually shaped a lot of my life after that.
This dictum that you have formed,
Yeah.
it was successful in your case. Do you believe that it would be successful in other people's cases also?
I think it depends on how you define. I would say it was a failure in my case. When I came back, I was jobless and unemployed and had no prospects, right? But I'd grown so much that eventually the world rewarded that. So in a way, what happens is that if you take a very short unit of time as success or failure, then you likely view the growth experience very negatively.
Okay.
Because the act of returning from a very significant growth experience that the world doesn't know how to judge. Because the next time, as I said, we'll talk probably about it, I took a year off to learn yoga and meditation, even more random, right? So the world doesn't know how to judge that, but you grow so much as a person, as a soul, that it reflects in every action
What
that you
if
do in
you
the
had
world.
not found a job after you had come back from that life-altering trip?
Can I plug my book and say that there is a book called The Freedom Manifesto that I've just written?
Go ahead.
So the book Freedom Manifesto, which is why I had the good fortune of speaking to you also, there is a rule there which is called the 60-day rule. So if you look at mathematically studies in India across all salary grades from 3 lakhs to 50 lakhs or even 1 crore, in India, if you leave a job voluntarily, it takes you 60 days to find a job again. And in the US, that number is salary divided by 20,000. So if your salary is $200,000, you divide it by $20,000, it takes you 10 months to find a job. So if you know mathematically, and that's like proven over large, statistical studies, which is what I reference in the book, that look, if you come back, it'll take you 60 days to find a job in India, or maybe salary divided by $20,000 if you make the worst case, and it'll take you 10 months to find a job. As long as you're prepared for that, that's the scenario. Maybe you double that time and say worst case scenario will take me like 120 days, or then you're reasonably prepared to take the plunge, knowing that there'll be a
This
interim
is
period. It's mathematically, what I've put in the book is mathematical research. Yeah.
Leaving a job is not such a boo-boo as people make it out.
Correct. So I think much of these decisions are in your mind. They are they are much more significant. And part of what I wrote in the book is that if you make these decisions of growth with some mathematical models and mental frameworks, then you'll make astute decisions.
Keep Off the Grass. Tell me about it.
Keep Off the Grass was written in 2008. It was, I had a very...
First book must have been out of your own experience.
First book was out of my... And in fact, every book is autobiographical in that sense. And the first book was very autobiographical. And I thought that a lot of people like me who kind of wanted to break out of the path that was laid out to them, the playbook laid out for them, would get a sense of energy from reading a book about backpacking and travel and adventure. So it was a backpacking, travel, adventure-based theme. And so that was the first 2 novels.
You also wrote during a time when the West was discovering India in a big way. There were a lot of films coming out.
Yeah, Slumdog Millionaire came around that time.
On the new India.
Yeah.
And liberalization fruits had
Just
begun to be
correct.
reap in. They were beginning to reap in. So, would you say that that was a favorable time when you pitched that book, or no? It was just out of innate desire to write.
I wrote it out of the innate desire to write because when you write your first novel, you have no clue at all whether that you have so many doubts in your mind, right? Your first doubt is whether I'll be able to take the seed of an idea, turn it into a 300-page novel.
Yes.
Then you actually go on that endeavor, and then after that you have to figure out that, look, I have to get a literary agent who eventually gets me a publishing deal. First novel, you can't have that concept that strong that,
You were writing on the job?
I was writing on the job. And half I started writing during this backpacking phase. I started writing in my diary and stuff, and then I finished it when I came back to my job.
How long did it take you?
The first book took only 6 months, actually.
Okay.
The first book took 6 months. The third novel, in fact, took 5 years. So this is the irony of life.
Johnny Gone Down. That's the second book.
That was the second book, yeah.
And it seems to be very big in its scope. How did you come about that?
That came directly as a result of living in South America for 3-4 months, in Brazil, Peru, and then kind of going from there to Central Asia, living in Mongolia for a few months, then backpacking in Eastern Europe. So I had really started to think that the Vasudev Kutumbakam idea, that the whole theme of Johnny Gone Down is like a Forrest Gumpish story about a man who gets caught in the civil war in Cambodia, escapes from there to Brazil, becomes an entrepreneur in the US. It's a very Forrest Gumpish kind of story. And it did quite well at that point of time. Ronnie Screwvala are making a movie on it now. So it did very well because it had cost, to your point, India was changing and it had caught some zeitgeist.
Indiana Jones kind of.
Yeah, Indiana Jones-ish kind of experience. And I think it caught some zeitgeist because I think our worlds were opening at that same time. Yeah.
And now you were selling food and beverage.
Now I was selling food and beverage after that, yeah.
From soap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then
I sold food and beverage, did quite well at that, selling food and beverage. And then
I keep on coming back to telling our listeners this because, man, you had one hell of a checkered career.
One head of a very checkered career. I would say a miracle career exists, So, but, it's a miracle in some form. And that's part of the reason I wrote this book, The Freedom Manifesto, which is you have to follow your own weird self, right? And I think, as I said, my conclusion is that if you choose these very intense growth experiences that look very checkered, but you transform a lot as a soul, as an individual, then eventually the world rewards you for them. And I think I learned that because, as you said, I came back to doing food and beverages after this whole backpacking.
4 years, and that too,
4 years.
The fifth or the fourth largest food and beverage company. You always get jobs in the Ivy League of companies, and then you leave them.
Yeah.
So would you say that you are a compulsive chucker?
I would say I complete a journey and go on to the next one is how I think of it.
But
I
you
never
must be
leave in the
leaving
middle.
entire family into case of nerves. I mean, here is my son making so much money, working in such a big company, and then suddenly says, "Daddy, I got to leave."
Yeah.
So,
I remember once I was at a family dinner and, we didn't talk about that, but when I was about to leave for a year of doing yoga and meditation, and one of my very close relatives, he said that, look, he never wants his kids to grow up like me because he don't want them to be kind of perpetual wanderers, who have no home and no address. It wasn't meant to be. It was a very typical Indian family comment in which you just say what's in your mind. So I remember it struck me very hard because I guess I'd never felt that I'd fallen so far off the wagon that that people would not want to be me at all, sort of a thing. Yeah. But as you said, I came back to food and beverages. Actually, did quite well because, as I said, I'd grown so much. I was actually a very good leader when I came, or was a better leader than I would have been.
How did you grow to be a leader in that upswing? You keep on saying that every experience made me grow as a leader.
Yeah.
What factors did you improve upon?
I would say, for example, I had the humility of being jobless before I found the next job, right? Humility of really 3-4 months of peddling my resumes around. So I was grateful that there is a job and a career.
First step.
Which you don't. If you're very entitled from an IIM, etc., you've never experienced those periods of sleeping on a sister's couch or something like that, right? So I was grateful. I would say, when you're in the US and you're leading teams, I think at some level you have to truly believe that everybody is one thing, which I always did, but I think it was a much more deeper reality. I think that made me closer to the people I was working with, much closer to the people I was working with, because I was very myself, and so I think things like that. You changed a lot from backpacking for a few months. I'd written, and because of I always believe that my biggest regret in my life is that my first act of creativity happened very late. I wrote my first novel at age 28, 29.
That's not late.
And that's not late, but if I had done it, if I'd done even one act of creativity before, like, creating a YouTube channel or that time blog or whatever, I feel like when your first creative project, you pour your entire life into it. Then you have that feeling where your vessel is empty. And then you start filling your life with more experiences because the moment you attempt a second creative project, which you will do if you do a first creative project, you realize that you have nothing to say almost, So I think what happened during that period was I'd just written my first novel and I was filling my life with a lot of experiences, and that helped me a lot because I got more and more creative,
But Karan, when creativity is linked with bread and butter,
Yeah.
and say first vessel,
Yeah.
you fill it up with creativity, but is not translating into dinero or bread and butter to that extent,
Yeah.
then kind of frustration sets in.
Yeah.
Then how do you keep on plugging in?
I actually think it's a wonderful question. I always believe that you should, I think there's a theory called sex and cash theory or something, that you should keep your creative energy and your financial energy separate. If you kind of mix that, your creative energy will diminish because you'll put a lot of your financial criteria on it. Ki, I should build my platform now and this and that. So you shouldn't mix the two in a way, the creative life and the financial life, if you will. I actually quite believe in that. So I kept my job going all these years because I didn't want to mix my creative life and my financial life, if you will. Till the very end when I did a startup, which I think it's own form of creativity. It's a business form of creativity. But in those writing days, I never mixed it too much.
You stopped selling food and beverage and you took a diametrically opposite job. You became the CEO of the leading educational TV channel in the world, the Southeast Asia division. How did that happen?
There was a break in the middle. So the break in the middle was in the height of this food and beverage phase. My mother had died from cancer very early. She was in her early 50s.
Must have been devastating.
It was very devastating because I was very close to her. And also in that period, I spent a lot of time with her. So I could really see the body deteriorate, right? And I was very always pulled to all the Buddhism and stuff. But in that period, I got very deep into what is the meaning of an existence in which you have to end like this kind of questions, right? Those very strong first principle spiritual questions, if you will. So in 2012, I had taken a year. At that time, I didn't even know it would be a year, where I went very deep into yoga and meditation. I went from Europe to India by road without any possessions, kind of the idea
Were you seeking closure?
I was seeking closure, and I was seeking some kind of a transcendental experience into understanding the nature of birth, life and death. Really, truly, I was very wanting to go deep into it. So I went from Europe to India by road.
You weren't angry that you lost mom to cancer?
I wasn't say angry as much as puzzled on the meaning of this life, which ends in such a debilitating way. Like it doesn't end with
No
dignity, it
regrets
ends
that
with
you didn't get
debilitating.
married in front of her?
No, I didn't have any regrets on that. I was by then too far corrupted. I was too shameless by that time to know. By then I had decided that I'm going to live my own destiny, And I was also, as I said, in this period, I'd taken a year off to learn yoga. I mean, I wouldn't have been a very attractive candidate in the marriage market anyway, because I was leaving my job to... So then I learned yoga teachers training in the Sivananda Ashram in Madurai. So I stayed there for a few months, became a yoga teacher. I went up to the Himalayas and lived in Uttarkashi for a few months and learned meditation. And so I think that period happened. Then when I came back after that period, again, something had shifted very dramatically, because I won't say that I got any spiritual realization, but I started to appreciate the body-mind connect better for sure. So I couldn't do food and beverages marketing anymore.
Okay.
So then I was really confused because I didn't want to do consumer goods at all. Because my career so far had been consumer goods, but I couldn't do it. I did it for a little bit to kind of refill my finances after taking another year off. So I did it for a while, but my heart was not in it. So then I decided to become a full-time writer in New York, publish my book internationally.
You deconstructed almost every known author who has hit it big, from James Joyce to Philip Roth, as per your interview.
Yeah.
And then you had 61 rejections.
Yeah.
And you still didn't give up.
Correct.
Why?
I'm a person who believes that, when you look at my checkered past, as you say, it feels like somebody who's left things in the middle. But actually I don't. I take a journey to its full logical conclusion. And I don't give up until then. I'm very obsessed by completing journeys in a way. And I believe that, my output is not in my control, but the input is in my control. I'm going to give 100%. I just wake up every day with the sense that I'm going to give 100% of my
That's
energy to my
Bhagavad Gita
input.
you were quoting.
Yeah, but I won't say I'm as pure in the nishkam karma, if you will, which is complete desirelessness or complete detachment from the outcome. I just have figured out a philosophy that I'm gonna completely detach from the output, but I wake up every day thinking that I have to give my 100% of my energy to the input because that's a controllable factor. That's why I just kept going, and my goal was that I would write a novel which was world class enough to be published all over the world, not just in India. And I just kept going at it until it was published all over the world. It was my first novel published outside India in a significant way. Yeah.
This was the Yoga of
Max's Discontent. And it was called The Seeker in India.
Seeker in India. You left the television industry now, and you started this Edtech company.
Yeah.
In which you taught coding and
Yeah.
its application to the kids between 6 to 14, so they could make apps and games and other kind of things. How did this idea seed in you?
This idea seeded in me. That's why I think that's why kind of part of the reason I wrote this new book was that the dots really connect. When you think you're going through these divergent paths, you feel like they're very different from the people around you who are going down a straight line. But for me, the dots connected because the core idea of the company I founded was that kids should be builders and creators. As I said, my only regret in life was that I started creating very late, and creating opened up my world. So the whole idea was kids who code or learn music later, which is what we did, they start believing that they can create anything in this world because they just put lines of code together and outcomes come. And they don't get that sense of satisfaction in almost every other field that they learn because, those are logical, time-bound, 4 plus 4 is always 8. Here you can make interesting combinations and create interesting outputs, right? So it was a new world of Lego, if you will, done in coding. So that was the idea, and that came from this idea of like, my kids should be creators because I had my kids at that time, they were 6 and 4. I wanted them to be builders and creators, and I felt like they were not equipped in any way to be builders and creators by the systems that they were entering. So that was kind of the idea of starting Whitehead Junior, and on the company that I started, that was the idea.
I asked this question because most of the engineers who start their startups are into FMCGs or into service industry.
Yeah.
You were going into something which is creative as well as learning.
Yeah.
So this is something unique. Did you kind of have that feeling when you were starting it?
I don't think anymore about whether the thing is that all 0 to 1 ideas are always at the edges of a system. They're never at the center of a system. At the center of the system is ideas that exist, and big companies chase those ideas or established systems chase those ideas. At the edges of the system, you're always going to have weirdish kind of ideas, right? Like which nobody knows whether they'll work or not. So I don't think in terms of are others doing it or is it unique. I just feel like it's an idea. I know it'll be at the edges of the system, and most people will say this is like not going to work or they'll reject it. And I just have realized that that's a 0 to 1 nature. I was just talking about this to someone, and one of the rules in my book, it's called 90% failure, 100% learning. When you look at, I'm very fortunate to see 3 creative industries very close by. Writing, because I wrote books, media, and then started my own startup, right? And I've seen exactly the same statistics, unbelievable. 90% of books fail. These are 90% of books published by major publishers. They fail. They don't make their money. TV channels, 90% of TV channels that you launch fail. 90% of movies with big banners, they fail. And 90% of startups fail backed by the top venture capitalists who are very smart. Creative industries are like that. There's a 90% failure rate. So I stopped looking at anything and saying, look, this idea is random or weird. It's just an idea and you have to take it to some conclusion if your soul is saying it needs to be there in the world.
Would you say that some of your stay on the ground, your pragmatic wisdom comes from your wife, who happens to be a nutritionist as well as baby sleep coach?
Yeah.
What is baby sleep coach?
It's a very interesting and very valuable field, I think.
Uh-huh.
So she is really, I would say, a parenting coach, out of which she wrote one book on the first
Sleep,
phase,
baby, sleep.
baby sleep. The first phase when you are when you have very young kids who are young babies who are unable to sleep, and it's a torturous phase for parents because it can last for years. So she kind of picked up that and created a framework for how to get your kid to sleep through the night at 6 months, which I think is a very powerful thing for parents who are going through that particular phase.
And you've gone backpacking with your wife all over the world. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we went together. She did the yoga teachers training and stuff with me. We did that together. So yeah, we've had and we went from Europe to India by road together. So we've had a lot of I would say adventures together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then you decide to sell your
company?
Edtech company to India's leading Edtech company for 300 million US dollars, which is roughly translates to 2,500 crores. Now you could sit back, enjoy life, you start a venture capital company yourselves. Why
Yeah.
you are still trying to make another startup and still hungry, still roaming around, restless?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you, Karan Bajaj?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I wish I was the kind of person who could like sip cocktails at the beach now, but I I think there is a concept in which you know very well in the Indian philosophy called dharma, not karma, dharma, which is that look, a tree can just be a tree. It can't look at the river and say, the river is having so much impact in the world. It's flowing to so many places. I should be the river. The tree is just meant to be a tree, grow and bear fruit. So I think I'm just meant to kind of work a lot. I like working a lot, whether it's in my writing or in my corporate career or in my startup before this, I work a lot. And I think it's kind of a little bit of my dharma to work. And I think now I'm kind of have this very strong tendency to work at a scale which can really move some metric of India in terms of like employment creation or, in terms of like, sustainability
You're
and
giving
health.
back to the nation.
Yeah, giving back to the nation by my, like, in a way I want to do it with my work, because I like working a lot. So I want to work in things that can really have a multiplier effect. So I think I'm doing a startup in the environmental sustainability and health space.
Great. Karan Bajaj, people like you are needed in this world because people like you have their heart in the right places and the world needs that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this wonderful, thoughtful interview.
In our national program of talks tonight, you just heard an interview entitled In Quest of Himself, in which media professional, Edtech pioneer and author Karan Bajaj was in conversation with Naveen Gupta of All India Radio, Delhi. Produced by Naveen Gupta, this program came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.